thank you very much for joining me on the channel and welcome to 2023. First of all, I must apologise for not producing a video for about 4 weeks. We've had relatives here over Christmas. It's been a busy time, and that is the say is that. So today what I'm going to do, I've moved into the garage first of all because it's going to be 38 degrees, 40 degrees today, and it's just too hot to work out in the sun. So I'm in the garage. Might have to go out and buy a fan at this rate, but we'll see how we go. What we're going to do today is brakes and slide pins. Now, I had a bit of an escapade. I had my brother-in-law here from the UK, and he has cerebral ataxia and doesn't walk very well. He loses balance a lot, and he likes camping. So I thought I'd take him camping, or take him out for the day. And we went to Mount Skiing, and we were going to come back around the Barkley River track onto the Rump Saddle and back that way. And when we got on the track, we came across this whopping great tree, which we just couldn't get past. Even if I'd had a massive chainsaw, I don't think I could have cut this tree up and moved it. So we had to turn back, and in the process of doing that, I went through a muddy puddle too fast, swamped my alternator with mud, and let's say I won't be ever buying an electric car because I now know what range anxiety is. When you have no power to going into your batteries and it's night time and you're trying to get home, that is range anxiety. So fortunately I managed to swap my alternator under warranty, and I've got a new alternator in there now and it's all working again. However, in the process of doing that, I did swamp the brakes a little bit. They did get a bit muddy and the brake light came on. Now the brake light came on probably because the alternator went off, but I'd still like to check the slide pins, because the rear lower slide pins on Jackaroo have a reputation for sticking, and if you keep them well lubricated, that's the ticket. So without further ado, let's get on with it. Okay, so let's talk about essential tools. Brake parts lubricant. You need to use this, not general grease, and the reason is that general grease will dry up and stick the slide pins. This is better, it withstands the heat better, extreme temperature range, and brake cleaner. You need to be able to clean your brakes, especially the rotors, after you've been working on it, because you might put greasy finger marks all over it, and grease and brakes don't go together. So those are two essentials. So let's get on. The first thing, jack up the car. Okay, so I've got laser here now, so what I've got now is one of these. In fact, I've got two of these, but one of them doesn't work. I don't know if you can see that, but that is a pneumatic jack, and the pneumatic jack is what we use to jack up the car these days. So one of them doesn't work, the other one does. I got it replaced free of charge because one didn't go up, so they sent me another one. So I've got two. So first job, turn on the compressor. Okay, I've took out the bit where the compressor was filling up, and the compressor is now full. I've connected up my jack. A couple of other things you're going to need is a 19mm socket for the wheel nuts. There, you'll need a bin, and you'll need a bag, probably a bag of rags. And I get these from Bunnings. The painter's rags do the job perfect. So grab yourself a couple of rags because you'll need them. Right. So I don't need to tell you this, but I'm going to anyway. First job is to discover where you've just put the 19mm socket, which is there, and loosen the wheel nuts while the car is still on the ground, because it's really difficult when the wheel's spinning around to loosen the wheel nuts. Oh, it's impossible if they're too tight. yourself a good breaker bar. I'm going to call the breaker bar because that's exactly what they do. I'll just go so you can see what's going on here. Hopefully you can see that. Right, safety first. I've chopped, because I needed to release the rear brake so I can turn this wheel slightly. I've chopped the front wheel, front and rear, to stop the car moving. Last thing we want is it falling off the jack. A couple of other things you're going to need: axle stands. You need axle stands for safety. I won't push them on me yet because I'll jack the car up, but to get the jack in place. Need to push the jack in. Jack up the car. Oh. What I've actually done is I've picked the wrong jack. Oh dear. Well, I'll get the right jack. We'll try again. I guess that's the problem when you have two of them. Now these jacks will also work manually, so you still have to make sure you've tightened up the valve underneath before you can operate it pneumatically. Let's try again. Sorry about the noise, I've turned off the compressor for now. I've got my jack and axle stand under there. I've got the wheel off, as you saw on the video there with the noise. So, let's go through how a caliper works. Now, on the Jackaroo, they're a single piston caliper, and a single piston caliper works in a specific way. And for the braking to work correctly, you need the slide pins working. Now, the other thing is, the reason I started at the rear is because the rear slide pins are the ones that get affected the most, and I want to check the drums. Now on the Jackaroo, the parking brake are shoes and drums, and that's the shoe and drum in there. Now when you're driving, it uses the disc brakes, but when you park, it operates the shoes in here. So I want to check them out, make sure they're okay and they're not full of mud and that type of thing, make sure it's all clean. So the first thing to do is to loosen off the slide pins, and they look like about 14 mil. Right, we've got 14. So that's a 14. Doesn't look like the ugly dog is going to fit on there, so that's going to be a problem. So we may need to use the breaker bar again. The space is limited by that hanger for the even this only just fits. I might have to get a ratchet, this is too long. 1 second. I'm going to have to get underneath and just give it a shove. So what I'm doing here is I'm loosening off the slide pins, ready for when I take the caliper off, because it becomes a pain in the butt when the caliper's on. The caliper's off, because when the caliper comes off, you're having to hold it in your hand and undo them, and it's not easy. So I'm just wondering whether that's 19 millimeters or not. On the back it could be 17. That's 17. Well, I think I can get in with a ugly dugger for that. Yeah, 17 mil. There we go. Let's see if we can get them loose. So I'm now removing the caliper bolts that hold the outer part of the caliper on. This is the piston assembly, that's the caliper itself. One, two. Now the bolts are quite short, and as you can see I keep them lubricated so they will undo, because there's nothing worse than bolts that are seized in due to mud and other nastiness. Now, before we pull this caliper off here, I need two things. I need my brake compressor to push the piston back in, but I also need something to hang this caliper assembly up onto here, because I don't want it dangling down. Okay? So I'll just get a bit of wire. Now, having a son who's a welder does have its advantages, because you've always got a welding rod to hand. So I'm going to fashion a hook like so, and the hook's going to hook in there, or maybe the other way up like that. Then I'm going to hook the caliper onto it so it holds the weight of it and doesn't stretch the rubber hose. Now I'll just grab my brake piston compressor and show you that. The thing about our garage, you always find rubbish. Right, this tool here is where you go in there and it's going to ratchet on it, and it ratchets it open and it allows you to compress the brake cylinder. I'll show you in use in a second. So first of all, let's secure the caliper onto the hook like I don't want it on that seal. Right, it's falling in. So here's the brake pads. You can see they're evenly worn. If one side was tapered, like in the picture I'm about to show you, that's when you need to alert yourself and say, hang on a minute, my slide pin's sticking. And I'll explain to you why that is the slide pin in a second. Okay, so that's another one that's evenly worn, so they're good. Not bad for air brakes. Give them a clean in a minute. Right, let's take this off the hook and I'll give you a bit of a demo of how this works. In fact, let's put it back on the hook and pump the piston back in first. I'll take the clips out and then... So, that's what you're trying to avoid, everybody. So what happens here is, these are what are called anti-squeal shims, or brake shims, or they hold the brake shoe in place. Okay, you can get them out, so I would take them out until you put the brake shoes back in. Quite often they, with the heat it's generated down here, they get a bit less springy than they were, and quite often you need to just bend the tabs back to get them to lock on. I'll show you them in a little while. So you've got one brake pad here and another brake pad there, hopefully you can see. The piston pushes out of there and pushes this brake pad against the rotor. But what pushes the pad on this side? Well, once that hits the rotor, it pushes back, which forces this to move along the slide pins, which pulls in the rotor on the disc pad on the other side onto the rotor and causes the squeezing of the brakes to make them work. I think maybe this wire is not quite strong enough. I think it's bending. Alright, so what we need to do now is we need to remove the slide pins. So these are the slide pins here. Let's take one out and I'll show you. So that if they're easy to move like this is, then you're doing well. And that shows you that putting the correct lubricant on works fully. I'll clean them up in a second and show you them. Just bear with me. Now, I'm just going to take this off because I need to get access to that side. And I'm quite reasonably happy with this. This is what you get when you use the correct lubricant. Slide pins that come out. Now we've already got the troubled bottom slide pin out. Now I can guarantee that if you've used general grease on these, what will happen is they'll seize up. The grease goes dry and it jams them into the holes. So let's take this off and I'll show you how it works and why you don't use general grease. Okay, so let's hang that onto there for safety. This is the caliper part here, and you can see you've got a protective boot that comes out, and the slide pins go in and out of here, and as you can see they're free to move. Yeah, now if that was jammed, that part of the caliper wouldn't be able to move and it would do this, and that's what causes uneven brake wear. So it is essential that you go and you purchase some correct brake lubricant. In the long run it might be a bit expensive to buy, $40 something I think that tube cost me. Came from Retco and I was told that this is what all the garages buy from them, and so I mean that's no recommendation to me. I mean I don't buy it because the garages use it, but it is Bendix, and Bendix have a hell of a reputation, as you'll see by one of the videos I've shown you. Bendix are big in the brake market. So it lasts the life of the brakes, it silences calipers, it waterproof, will not wash out, as you can see it hasn't. Extreme temperature range, non-melting, chemical resistant. That's what you want. If you put grease in, grease hardens with heat, it hardens with time. It will be affected by chemicals, it will wash out, everything will happen to it. But the worst thing that happens in the slide pins, because the slide pins are inside these dust boots, right? Water can get in, but dust can get in. It can get in. If dust gets on grease and it goes hard, you ain't getting them slide pins out without a battle. As I found out when I stripped mine down for the first time, I noticed I couldn't bleed my brakes, and we couldn't work out. We tried and tried and tried. Couldn't work out why we couldn't bleed them, and it turned out that it was a stuck slide pin in the end. So always check your slide pins before you start going into other areas and replacing things, because the slide pins are key to braking correctly and efficiently. It's alright having one pad going on a thing, but if you've only got a little corner of one pad on the other side, you ain't going to do braking that well. So if the dust, these are new dust covers by the way, they're just dusty and dirty, which is what I suppose they should be. But if they're cracked or cut or split, you can buy them at Repco. Just go buy some more, because you don't want to be putting split dust boots on there, getting all dust in it, and then thinking to yourself, well, my slide pins are stuck, what am I going to do? It's because your dust boots have let loads of dust in, and unfortunately the best lubricant in the world is not going to work well with dust. And what I'm doing here is I'm just getting the old grease out, because there's grease inside these because of the way the brakes work. That's good. That's good. Like I say, when I did this last time, I renewed these because I had to renew slide pins. So, and it came with the slide pin kit came with 4 rubber boots, so I've reused them. I didn't need them for the front. It was the front slide pins I had to replace actually. So these boots are the same at the rear and front. So okay, so we've done that. Now we get our special tool, and I'll show you how this works. So it fits in that gap, and then you compress it like this. Now this is really good when you're putting new pads in, because the old pads are obviously thinner than the new pads, and the pistons come out to compensate. So when you put new pads in, you've got to push the piston back, and that's what this tool does. It pushes that piston back like that with a ratchet, and it works really well. I'm really pleased with that. And you just unratchet it and take it out, and there's the piston gone back in. Now, one thing you must do, you must be really careful doing this. You need to make sure you take your master cylinder cap off, otherwise there's nowhere for the fluid to go, and you don't want it overflowing. Now, if you haven't seen it, it's a good time to go look at my video on brakes and brake fluid. That will tell you all about your brakes and your brake fluid. But effectively, as brake pads wear down and they get thinner, this has to come out further, this piston, and as it's fluid it pushes it out, the fluid in the reservoir goes down, so you top it up as it goes down. You get new pads, you have to push this piston back, you push that fluid you topped it up with back out into the master cylinder, and the master cylinder overflows because it was full when you started, and you've topped it up since then. So it's important that you have some sort of method of getting the brake fluid out of there. Now I don't need to do that because these brake pads are fine, but if I was putting new brake pads in, I would need to remove some fluid as I push them pistons back. So just bear that in mind if you're doing new pads, sorry. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to give this piston a spray and a bit of a wipe down. Now always use brake cleaner for this. Don't be tempted to use degreaser, because the degreaser is a bit of an oily based stuff, and it may cause braking inefficiency if it gets on your rotor. So all I'm doing here is looking at the seal and the dust seal, and I can't actually see the seal, but there's no leaking, so I'm assuming the seal's okay. Alright, so brake cleaner is the way to go. This is what brake cleaner is for. When you see people spraying it on engines to remove oil and things like that, then that's fine, but this is actually what it's for, cleaning brakes. Now, because this is the rear, I actually want to remove this and check the shoes inside. Now on this one there should be a screw in there, but it's missing, so I'm just going to, the thing that holds this rotor on is the wheel nuts, yeah, and as you can see there's a bit of dust in there. I'll give it a clean out, and there's the shoe mechanism there, that is your handbrake, okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give the self-adjuster system a bit of a lubricate and a bit of a lubricate on here. Nothing major, but if you want to take the shoes off, you have to remove these two clips at either side, and then you have to remove these springs, and then the shoes will come off. They're just held on by those springs and those clips. The clips are to stop them moving this way, and the springs are to make sure they return once they go out. Once the handbrake cable pushes them out, the springs are just to make sure they return back in when you take the handbrake off. I'm not going to remove them. I'm going to give them a spray with brake cleaner, make sure they're clean. And now this is the real use for brake cleaner. This is what your brake cleaner is for, cleaning your brakes, and it doesn't leave any greasy, oily residue. It just cleans off the crap and then allows them to be. Now if you want to get really pedantic and you want to make sure your brakes are working well, because they can get a bit smooth, you can get a bit of sandpaper and rough them up a bit. Right. Now I'm going to use a bit of silicone grease here. Now the reason I'm going to use, well actually I might use lithium grease, but I've got to be very careful. I don't want to get any grease on those surfaces or on the disc inside. Now the disc's easy to clean, the drum, but these, if they get oil or grease on them, they'll soak it in and they'll become useless. So what I might actually do is just get a bit of air and just give them a blast out and get sure all the dust is out of them, and etc. So just bear with me a second. Sorry. Sorry about the noise. Okay, so this mechanism here and a mechanism underneath that you can't quite see are what operate the handbrake. So this is a bit of a pivot. In here is a flat, and the brake shoe sits on the flat, and as the brake turns it pushes the brake pad out. It either does that here or it does it at the bottom, I'm not sure which, but either way that's how they work. And then the brake pad shoes are pushed outwards against the inside of the drum. It's going to be another loud noise for a second while I'll just give this a clean. Lovely. Yeah, I'm happy with all of this. I'll just give that a quick, in fact I'm going to use brake lubricant on it. It's probably the better option. But I'm going to use it sparingly. Sorry about the voices as people across the road. Okay, now I'm just going to dip underneath and have a look down there. Okay, I probably should show you under here. Underneath, but down there is a star type wheel, and that is your brake adjuster, automatic brake adjuster for your handbrake. Just check that you can see okay. That looks okay. So I might just stick a little bit of lubricant on that. The name of the game for lubricating brakes is minimal grease. You don't need a lot. Now, what I need now is a cloth that's dedicated for brake cleaning. I don't want to be putting any oil or grease in here. Like so. Give it a good white round. We'll do the rotor afterwards because any finger marks is a problem. Right, we'll just let that dry for a minute. And that can go back on. It's all looking good. I might just give that another squirt. And another wipe. The key is any greasy finger marks are removed. That's very important. So without touching any of the inner surface, we've put the disc rotor back on now. And that, like I said, there's normally a screw in there that holds that on, but it's missing on this one. It doesn't really matter, it's only a retaining screw. The wheel nuts and the wheel hold the brake caliper on, the brake rotor on, sorry. The best lubricant for this type of thing is silicone spray lubricant or silicone lubricant. So I'm going to spray a bit of lube onto there. I'm going to spray, I don't want to spray them there because they're next to the pads. So another good idea is to put them on a piece of cloth, hold them in your hand and give them a good spray. The reason we use silicone is because silicone lubricates rubber. Right, let's wipe any excess off that. Okay, all looking good. Now, we do need to clean out the slide pin holes and put fresh grease in there, so we'll do that next. Let's find a decent cloth. It's going to be a bit messy otherwise. And we're going to spray lubricant into there and stick some cloth down the hole. And the best thing to push in there is the slide pin itself, with a little bit of cloth to get some excess grease out, if you can get a bit in. You can hear the slide pin hitting the bottom, but you can hear also the resistance when it gets liquid behind it, because it the lubricant creates an air barrier and causes it to have a bit of compression in there. So when you're putting it back together, you must make sure that it goes all the way in, like that. Okay, I think we're pretty much cleaned out there. Right, so we'll clean out that small hole there. I did bring some. Just need something long and thin to dab in there. Just give it a clean around at the top. Unfortunately, you do get a bit of dirt and dust in this, so it is wise to keep it well cleaned, which mine aren't, but will be in a moment, because the dust boot has to sit in there and lock into place. Okay, now we're going to on to the slide pin, so there's no need to put silicone grease or anything like that in there. This grease will do the similar job. So grease up your slide pin, make sure it's well lubricated. As you can see, this is blue, and if you watch Rayman Ray's videos on YouTube, blue is best, as he seems to think. Personally, I don't really care what colour it is as long as it does the job. I think that's the important thing. Alright, so we've lubed up the slide pin. What we need to do now is put one of these back in the hole. I'll just put the slide pin down for a second. We need to reinsert this. Now you may need a bit of silicone grease just to get this in, but it should be alright. Now you can see that's gone in properly. Now we shove the slide pin through the hole. Now we need to make sure that slide pin's getting to the bottom, which it is. Push any lubricant that's there inside the boot so it goes on next time we put it together. Now we're going to do the same with this one, and this one's full of gunk as well, but this one's not as dusty. Slide in the rubber boot. There's the rubber boot fitted. Now you can put grease in those holes prior to putting the pin in if you wish, but I wouldn't recommend that, because as you know, too much grease can be as bad as too little grease. And if you don't know that, well, trust me, it can. If you put too much grease in, you can stop things from working, you can cause compression. It's just excess grease just gathers dirt. There's no need for it. Just put in the amount of grease you need. Okay, now these slide pins are slightly worn, but I wouldn't say they were excessive. And don't be alarmed if your slide pins have got a rubber end on. It's just a seal, and it won't affect the slide pins at all. Now note I've put in a bit of the lubricant on the threads. That's just really so I can get them off again next time. And I'll ditch that hair, it's not one of mine, far too long. There's another one. Now let's turn our attention to the next thing. I'll keep that off the ground. The next thing are these. Now these are anti-squeal shims and caliper, padlocation shims, I guess. You can clean them, it's not a problem. The one thing that these things will do is allow the pads to slide backwards and forwards freely. So it's probably a good idea to give these grooves a clean out. because that's where the end of the pads, that's where the end of the pad sits, and probably where it slides. These tabs on the end, well, I'm not sure about those, but we'll bend them in a little bit. Right, so very sparingly, and that is enough grease right there. Put some grease into the bottom of these grooves. Because what you don't want is that grease to melt and go down all over your pad and onto the disc rotor and stop your braking efficiency. Okay, so you don't want to do that. So these will only fit on one way. That's a better way. That looks good. Yeah, they don't lock on anymore. I can bend them in a bit more. Yeah, that's got it to stay on a bit better. Still a bit tight at this side, but you can get new ones of these. Sometimes when you buy pads, they'll give you new shims. I don't have any new shims. And don't forget to wipe off any excess, because you don't want any excess lubricant in this area. Very, very small amount, just a surface covering is all it needs. It might not even need any lubricant, to be honest, but I like to put some on because I like to know when the pads are free to move. But if you pile loads of grease on there, you're just asking for trouble. Okay, so we've done that, we've done this. We can take that out of there, don't let that dangle down on the rubber hose like that. So what we need to do now is we need to put the caliper back together and put the slide pins in. So the slide pins go through these holes and then into there. Okay, and then they screw in. One of the problems is you can end up pulling the rubbers out, and you don't want to do that. So let's get that back in as it needs to be, and like that. And we get the slide pin and go through and screw it in. Now we've got them in. Now there's a torque for these. Just bear with me a sec. Let's find the ratchet and the correct spanner. Now this is Rob's wrench, and you have to use a pair of pliers to get it to change direction. We don't need to tighten them up yet. I get to show you my new special tool. See, I'm all about making life easy. And I'll buy a tool to make my life easy. Now you don't need to tighten these up yet, just up, finger tight will do fine. And as the Americans call it, snug, because they can't talk properly. Finger tight, that's all you need to do. Hand tight, like that. We'll tighten them up once this gets back on, because you imagine tightening it up when it's loose like this. Nightmare scenario. So give that a clean, make sure there's no lubricant on there, excess lubricant hanging about, we don't need that. That's good. That looks good so far. The caliper's free to move, that's good. And we'll balance that up on there so it doesn't fall off. Right, so we've got the two mounting bolts here. Now you can see I've used brake lubricant on them. Probably not the best idea. it did work, and they are nice and tight and they're nice and loose because of the brake lubricant in there, but probably not the best idea in the long run. Now those bolts are getting a bit worse for wear. I may have to replace these at some point because the threads don't look absolutely fantastic, I have to say. So just bear that in mind. We've probably got more. I'm not going to copper grease. This is the correct stuff to use for a bolt in this situation. And again, you only need to use a little bit, enough to cover the threads. I've decided to put some more on my hands, which I didn't need to do, but enough to cover the threads, and that's plenty. Don't need to get excessive with the copper grease. I'll get it off my fingers. I use copper grease quite extensively. A lot of engineers will not use grease at all because they say that it affects the torque settings. I'd rather get the bolts out. Now, what you must be careful of when you're putting this on is that you don't twist the pipe. Okay, let's get the pads in. Now, well, I should have done this already, but I haven't. Just, if that's got stuff in it, just give it a clean out. Now be careful if you've got asbestos pads, you want to be wearing gloves, etc, etc. Not many pads these days are asbestos, but you just never know. It's alright to give these a good dousing in brake cleaner, because the brake cleaner will take any oil or debris that might have got on there off them and rejuvenate the surface. Now, these plastic pads on the back, they're there for a reason. Those are called anti-squeal shims, and when you get brakes that squeak, what happens is the pads move up and down against the piston or against these, and that there, you can see where the piston's dug into it, so we know which side's which. That's the piston side, but you can see how the plastic has stopped the brake shoe from causing any issues with squeaking and squealing and that sort of thing. Now this shim is coming off. That's it. So what you do is, does anybody, I'll take this back out again. Does anybody know what this is for? If you do, just ignore this, but basically once you see how that the end of that is just proud of where the pad is, that is designed to make a noise. If you hear that scraping, your pads are worn out. So that is what that's for. It's an indicator to let you know your pads are stuffed. So if you hear it, change your pads before you need to change your pads and rotors. Pads are a lot cheaper than pads and rotors, I can tell you. So that's that one in. Let's give this one a clean out. Get the stuff from inside there. This is probably just mud and brake pad material. The slot down the middle is just an area that keeps the pad clean for you to so the brake dust doesn't build up on your pad. Now make sure you put these in the right way around. It's easy to get them the wrong way. So just make sure that they stay in, and then just make sure that the pads go over the wheel like that when you put it in. Okay, now you can see where the bolts go. So let's put the bolts back in. one. Well, that was two. Right. I'm happy with that brake on that side. That's not bad at all. Very good indeed. So what's next is we need to make sure that the brake disc is clean. So what I suggest you do here is get a clean cloth. Give the brake disc a wipe down. Like so. Now, I forgot to clean the other side of the brake disc. But it's probably quite important you do that. So make sure you clean both sides of your brake disc down. Now then, new tool time. Let me go find it. And here it is. I got it from Repco. It's a Mech Pro, and that is a torque meter. Now, one thing is, when you have a torque meter, you need the torques. So I'll have to go get them. So I'm just going to pause it for a sec. Okay, I've got the document here I actually wrote to do the procedure, etc. The parking brakes, etc. we can look at. Okay. So now the slide pins at the back and the mounting bolts at the back are a different torque to the front, so just bear that in mind. Now these come straight from the manual. So the slide pins at the back are 32 pounds-feet and 77 pounds-feet for the mounting bolts. So we'll do that now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work out how to set this up. I've never actually used this, so now it's already set to pounds-feet, so we'll increase it. What do we need it set to? 32. 32 pounds-feet. Now I ain't going to fit in there, so that's going to be a bit of an issue, but not a lot we can do about that, so we'll just put up with it. Now if I put this on and lift this up, that'll give me a figure. What's that? Now that wasn't huge, so I shall try and get this to a similar figure. Okay, now we need to set this to 77 pounds-feet. Now I'm going to have problems with this because I can't tug on it that way hard enough. So let's make sure we can do this. Okay. Great little bit of kit that. Quite impressed. Right, I'll leave that for now. And we'll put the wheel back on. Turn down the that cable isn't twisted. Okay, everything seems to be back to normal. I'm happy with that. So let's put the wheel back on. For those of you who don't know, the wheel nuts on the Jackaroo are 19mm. And save yourself any embarrassment. The best thing to do is to thread these on to start by hand. No grease, no nothing, just straight on. I usually put a couple on all the way as far as I can get them to make sure the wheel's on straight, and then the rest just start them off, and then hugga time. Alright, so that's easy to do. Lower the jack. Lower the jack from the other side, but unfortunately I'm going to take the axle stand out first. I'm just using one axle stand, so I'm only doing one side at a time. I'm going to do the front one next, just to show you the difference, and then I'll do the other two in my own time, and I don't need to film that because you've already seen. I just want to show you the difference between the front and the rear. Alright, let's lower the jack. Right, jack's down. Once the tyre's on the floor, it's I just normally tighten these up to tight, but today I'm going to use the breaker bar and the torque thing, because the torque is 87 pounds-feet. Now, it doesn't seem a lot. checking them all, make sure they're all tight. Fine, fantastic. Right, we'll do the front one. So, first things first, I'll take you guys up here. And there you can see the chocks on the front wheel and where we're working. Now I've got the rear wheel clear, back on the ground, I can take these chocks out, and I'm going to chock the rear wheel because I don't want the car rolling. So before I shift everything, the first job is to loosen the wheel nuts so that the Ugga Dugga will work. Obviously we just loosen them, we're not undoing them, because we don't want the wheel to fall off. We just want it to be loose when it's in the air, like that. Okay. Next job, seat jack. Now these jacks are heavy, there's no doubt about that, but the one thing I find quite hard is bending down and pumping the jack under the car. So this takes that away from me. Just don't forget to tighten up the valve before you push the jack under. Now this time I'm going to do it from the rear. The jack doesn't quite fit under the front lower control arm, so I need to put it in a different place. Bear with me. I think it's going to be better to jack it from the front. Of course, a good pneumatic jack still doesn't preclude you from crawling under the car. Oh! This is the noisy bit coming up now. Right, sorry about that. As you can see, what I was doing while that noise was, I've turned the compressor off, it wasn't full. Right, it's a significant difference to the front to the rear. These are much bigger. So the 14mm bolts that were holding on the slide pins on the front, on the back, are 17mm on the front. And the 19mm socket that undid the caliper is 21mm on the front. A big difference. Now, there is a bit of a trick if you can't get in. You can turn the wheel. And I should have done that and I haven't. So I'm going to do that now. So that should be enough to allow me to get this off. to that one. It's going to be a break about one. There we go. So, anybody that doesn't know, when you use a torque tool, you need black sockets. Black sockets are for torque tools, silver sockets are for wrenches. Bear that in mind. You're not supposed to use silver sockets with a torque tool, they're not designed to take the hammer in. If you look at the 14mm, see how much thicker on the body it is and how much stronger than a normal socket? That's because it has to take the hammer in. Okay, where's my hook? Let's find the hook I fashioned. Okay, so it'll go on this little upper control arm on this in this case. Now this is a significantly bigger caliper, so it needs to be supported. Let's just hope that this wire will hold the weight of it, and it will just. Okay. Now we get the 17mm and take off the slide pins. That one's done. And that one's done. Now I'll show you the difference between these slide pins and the ones on the back in a second when I get this out. This is so much heavier and harder to do than the rear ones are, which is one of the reasons why I started with the rear ones, but not the only reason. Now, I can't get this out because it's not in line, because the caliper's too heavy. It's decided to fall apart. Coming out, it's just a bit at an angle. There we go. And that one's a bit dry, so it's a good job we're taking these apart. Okay, so let's get this onto the hook and hold it up. Come on you go. Right. As you can see, these are significantly bigger pads than on the back, because they do a lot more work. This is the main force of your braking, the front. It'll be 70-30, something like that. 70% front, 30% rear when you're braking hard. Otherwise it's all the fronts. There's the shims off, and there we go again. Here we've got the front calipers. Now you can see that they're significantly bigger pins. Now what happens is, I'll get a cloth. New pins, but I had to buy these and replace mine because mine was shot. The upper pin is well lubricated and has been moving. The lower pin, can you see how a lubricant is drying out? That is the problem. That is the problem. You need to do this maintenance because of that very issue. And that was why this one is a little bit harder to get out. You can see there's a little bit more wear on it, but this one has a rubber seal on it too, which standard pins don't have. Now it's not an issue putting a rubber seal in, but just be aware that it can come off and it can block your pin from going right down, so just be aware of that. We don't have the brake drum on this side, on the front. We've obviously got the freewheeling hubs, which are set to free. What that does is it allows the wheel to turn without the drive shaft. If we turn this to lock, you see the drive shaft turning? Won't turn because it's in park, but if I turn it to free, the wheels just turn and this doesn't turn. That means that you're not turning your transmission for no reason whatsoever. When you're not in four-wheel drive, they can be on free, and that's how. That's why your transmission on the front doesn't work, and why, if you've got automatic lockers, you can disconnect them because this is disconnected. The locker's not doing anything. All right, so it's a good opportunity to have a quick look in here, shoes and these. boots. These are all fairly new, so mine seem to be okay. TV boots good. Everything seems to be good. I've given it a quick blast with air while the noise is going on. I'm going to give it another quick blast with air. Okay. Watch you don't blast your rubber boots down the hill. Okay. Got rid of a lot of the dust. Good airline that. Now, as you can see, there is mud everywhere. We really went through some really deep mud, and I did stuff up my alternator, so just beware of that. Don't drive through mud if you can help it. Alternator killer, but not a brake killer by the look of it. Seems to have fared well in the grand scheme of things. Specifically the most important stuff in the world. I need to check out the rubber dust seal and what have you on there. Fine. That's good. Okay, let's give these a clean. So one of them is going to be really dry inside. I think it's the top one, and the bottom one's going to be fine. So we'll leave that to soak for a minute, and we'll check out the rubber grommets. A bit gummed up, a bit of oil on it, but in good condition all the same. Happy with those. Let's give them a clean. Remember, you don't need to, but just recall that it's probably a good idea to renew the grease that's inside these. It does get in there because it does come out of the slide pin hole, but because it's a dust cap and it's supposed to stop dust getting in, it will stop the grease inside there as well. You can do, if you want, you can soak the cloth you're pulling through with brake cleaner, or give it a little bit of extra clean. But apart from that, all looking good. Right, so once you've given them a clean out, don't forget they need lubricating with silicone grease. Give them a bit more life. That's Aldi Special silicone grease. 3 in 1. When I was a kid, all oil was 3 in 1. So I've been making oil for a long time, so I wouldn't worry about it being 3 in 1 from Aldi. Good name. Right. Let's have a look at the slide pins. Give them a clean. We've done this one already, but we'll give it another go. As you can see, I bought these new replacement slide pins because mine had seized. Somebody had used engine oil on them, and they weren't doing that well. Excuse me a sec. Any hairs. Right, so that one's good. Now this one has a seal on it. One can. A brake cleaner is going to dry the seal out. That's interesting. My sat-nav's talking to me, telling me it's going to. I've left the ignition on, so let's just turn that off. It's going off. So the important thing of the a slide pin, if you're using your original slide pins, you ain't going to have this rubber. But on this, it's important to keep that lubricated. So silicone grease will rejuvenate it, and then I'll put some of the brake lubricant on it when I put it back together. Now this time I'm going to do the pads before I put it back together. I don't need to remove the brake rotor. However, on here, because it's the front hub, it's got extra bolts to remove the brake rotor. I don't need to do it because I've got no drum to inspect. So what you're looking for on the calipers is a good amount of meat left on the brake pad material, and it's not uneven wear, which it isn't. It's been moving. I think it would have started to wear unevenly had we not done this service. That was nearly a disaster then. I know you sprayed silicone grease onto my brake pad. I'll move that out of the way. Yeah, they're all looking really good. I only replaced these last time I took it apart, so they're not looking bad at all. Right, so we know that the piston's good to go. I will give that a little spray of lubricant, just to give it a bit more life. Wipe out the excess. We don't need any excess oil in there. It's good. Okay, we can start to reassemble. One thing is, I've just got to clean out in the top of these slide pin holes, so that if it's all dirty and dusty in there and grimy, then you've probably got a faulty grommet. So it's worth having a quick look at that. Fit that one in. Yeah. Put this one in. Nice and easy. Get up the pins, insert them into the holes, and then Bob should be your uncle. Now, don't be scared to put grease on these, because this proper brake grease is the stuff that will stop it seizing. Now, I don't know if if the one with the rubber grommet should be at the top or the one with the rubber grommet should be at the bottom, but what I do is I fit them in the one that they fit in the best. And this top one is a bit okay. Back onto the hook for a minute. That was bended. Too much weight for this caliper. And another word of caution: you can put these pads in with the braking material on the wrong side. Just make sure you don't do that. It's easy to do. You just make a mistake, you've done it. Try again. Let's speed more haste. I think that's the key. to the mounting nuts, and these I've had brake lubricant on them, which I'm going to clean off and put copper coat on, because they're not, brake lubricant's not the right lubricant to do this with. I don't know why I put it on here, but this is Anti-sieze, so that when you want to take your brake nut mounting bolts out again, they'll come out. This is the advantage of doing your own work. If you take this to a shop, they won't put this on, or very few of them will, because they don't care if it doesn't come out again. It's not their car. But when you come to do this again, if it doesn't come out, you're not going to be the best happiest bunny in the hutch, are you? Now just bear in mind that because we push the pistons back a little bit, when you don't go shooting off into your car and drive off into the sunset before you press the brake pedals a couple of times to take up the slack. Okay, so I've done a bit of a description on what I've been doing, and I've done a procedure and explained how the brake caliper works with a small video. I will post this document for the Patreons, but otherwise you just need the manual to find the information. What's happening here? Okay, sorry about the delay, I'm being eaten. We've got the caliper. caliper back on and torque down. We've got the slide pins back in and torque down. All we need to do is put the wheel back on and lower it down. So let's do that. There we are. I don't know if you know this, and you probably do, most people do, but you should always put wheel nuts on, tighten them up anyway, in a star pattern. It just ensures even distribution of the force of the wheel nuts, because the wheel needs to be on fairly straight. You go opposites. Then you go around one more, opposite. Round one more, opposite. And you can do them again if you want, but I won't bother because I'm going to torque them up. Right, we'll torque these wheel nuts up. So that concludes the front and rear slide pins job. If you have any questions, please feel free to post a comment underneath. If you want to do any other topics, please feel free to mention that too. I'm happy to have a go at anything. Nobody has come up with a suggestion yet, but if you want to do a particular subject, then obviously I'm not going to do a crankcase removal or something like that, but things like brakes, and if you're not quite sure, just ask, we'll go through it, it's not a problem. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you out there.